Back in 2019, we had one of the biggest One Piece games ever coming out, One Piece World Seeker. This is a game I deeply appreciate for its story, its visuals, and its movement. And yet, when it was time to play the DLC, I decided to skip all of it. Why was that? I think World Seeker is better than a lot of people give it credit for, and it doesn't get enough credit simply because of combat. You see, you can make a fantastic game overall. If the combat of your action anime game isn't good enough, a lot of people are just gonna write it off. So World Seeker ended up being somewhat of a forgotten gem, and that's exactly why I decided to skip the DLC. Because when you start playing as Zoro, instead of grappling and flying across the sky as Luffy, you can wall jump and sprint a lot. If you remove this game's amazing exploration, all that's left is the combat, which isn't the best. Or so I used to think. Recently, Jack the Bus has been playing this game on his channel for the very first time, and he's playing it on extreme difficulty, which made me realize I haven't done that yet. I initially played the game on standard, I then speedran the game, which you usually do on the easiest difficulty. I've played and replayed World Seeker many times, but never did I challenge myself to try its hardest difficulty. And so, I booted up the game again, I set it to extreme, and about 20 hours later, I finished it. This is one of the few anime games that I feel is actually challenging. It gives players the option to bash their heads against the wall of enemy bullets that actually hurt. And I'm not going to sit here and say the combat is suddenly amazing on extreme difficulty, but it did make me appreciate it a bit more by forcing me to explore all of my options. And now that I have a newfound appreciation for this game, it's finally time to give this DLC a shot, to see if my decision to skip it was right all along, or if I was a bit hasty in my judgment. The Zoro DLC starts with his fight against Isaac, something we see from Luffy's point of view when we play the main game. After clashing with Zoro, Isaac says it was worth acquiring Zoro's data himself. This is something that never went anywhere in the original story, but is actually crucial to this DLC, so it has a great tie-in to the original plot. As I mentioned before, Zoro's mobility is a lot more limited. No more Gomu Gomu Rocket. Instead, Zoro has the ability to wall jump as much as he wants, and he also has this dash that you can point in any direction. With some animation cancelling, you're able to get this dash to fling you a little bit. It's some speedrunning tech that feels kind of good to pull off because it's technical, but the movement is nowhere near as fun as what we're used to with Luffy. Also, to represent Zoro's terrible sense of direction, they've made the map blurry. You can actually make it clear by unlocking a skill. It is the most expensive skill in the entire game, 1,000 points just to be able to see the map clearly. Well, I do think it's a funny gag, so I appreciate them for it. Oh wait, there's a trophy for getting all the skills. Fuck! Given Zoro's terrible sense of direction when he wanted to go towards the sunny, he ended up in Steel City, where we fight against the first mini-boss of the DLC, Captain Grocky. Extreme difficulty, everybody. Combat is actually where Zoro improves the game the most. All because of one simple change. If you land Zoro's entire combo string, the enemies stay standing up. This was a big problem with the game's original combat. A short string from Luffy would immediately knock an enemy down, and they would be completely invulnerable until they get up. This constant waiting and pausing is a big part of what made the combat system bad. And by keeping enemies standing, Zoro's combat feels a lot more active, even before you start investing into his skill tree. Zoro can also animation cancel by blocking after any of his attacks, which gives you even more freedom. It's not like combat is suddenly good, but it's definitely a lot better than Luffy's. Chasing after Isaac, Zoro finds himself at the sea prison, which is guarded by Marines. And this is where he finds another one of the main characters of this DLC. Tashiji is gonna follow us all the way to the bottom of the sea prison, where we find a secret door, leading to a hidden underground warehouse. This place is also a mystery to Tashiji. It's been built outside of the government's knowledge, so she calls a truce with Zoro in order to find out what is going on this island. That's her goal, at least. Zoro just cares about finding Isaac and slicing him up. But this is a brand new area built specifically for this DLC, and I gotta say, it's probably the worst new area of the 3 DLC packs. This warehouse is not fun to traverse, it's not fun to explore, and it's where most of the DLC takes place. This is when I remembered that I had actually tried this DLC before, and I quit when I got to this warehouse because I just was not having fun. But this time, I am committed to powering through it and to see what the other DLC have to offer as well. And so, after a good 45 minutes of cleaning rooms of Marines, interacting with switches, opening doors, and going deeper and deeper into this underground facility, we finally made it all the way to the lab, where we discover what the data Isaac was gathering was all for. This is Kagero, a robot that Isaac has been building with all the data he gathered from Zoro, all of his moves and all of his abilities. What this means in gameplay terms is that this boss is gonna adapt to your attacks. You're gonna hit him with your basic combo, great, that's only gonna work once. From that point on, he's gonna dodge all of the attacks in your basic combo. You need to change moves constantly until you defeat it. And I think that's where I'll leave it with the story. I don't want to spoil the whole plot. I'll say that you do come back to the surface, so the whole story doesn't just take place underground. It actually ties in with the radio tower mission from the main game, where Zoro stayed downstairs fighting against the Marines while Luffy climbed the radio tower. But then it does tell you to go down the whole factory again, and they have conveniently locked all the doors that you had previously unlocked. So you just kind of have to play through it one more time. It's not the best of times, but it does culminate with one of the most challenging boss encounters that I have faced in this game so far. And I know it's been a while since many of you have played World Seeker, but at the end of the base game, there is a cutscene that, thanks to this DLC, has gained a whole new meaning. About 4.5 hours is how much it took to beat this DLC on extreme difficulty with lots of deaths. That does make it a pretty short experience. That is before I spent another 5 hours grinding skill points so I would get all of his skills for trophies. Yeah, we're not just beating the 3 DLC, we are getting 100% of everything. But I liked how the story picked up on a small detail that was mentioned in the main plot and expanded into this whole narrative following Zoro and Tashiji, uncovering a conspiracy and learning even more about what was going on in that island. That said, the best part of World Seeker to me was always the movement and exploration, and Zoro's lack of movement paired with the awful new environment of the warehouse made it so this DLC was only enjoyable during boss fights for me personally. The moments in between were pretty dull, so I think I was right to skip this one, but let's find out if the same holds true for Sabo. Sabo came to this island for 2 reasons. 1, to investigate a weapons black market, which is a nice tie-in to the Zoro DLC. The warehouse where we just played is where those weapons were made. And 2, he has received an anonymous tip that the warden of this island is using Dynastones. If you remember the original game, Dynastones are the reason why everyone is on this island to begin with. They're basically an exploding rock, but the rock explosion can destroy entire islands. It's a power that rivals the ancient weapons. It's a big plot point in the original game. Now, Sabo here makes a great first impression. They sell him more as a stealth character, encouraging you to use takedowns a lot. And in open combat, he's got the best projectiles in the game. Those fireballs feel so good. He also has a new unique gauge that buffs his damage the higher it gets, but it starts depleting if you do nothing, so it encourages you to stay aggressive. His melee combo is a lot simpler this time around, which feels like a downgrade compared to Zoro, but all those factors combined do give Sabo a unique feel. Now, while he was looking for intel on those weapons and the Dynastones, Sabo finds out that there are several excavations going on throughout the island, so we're about to visit a few mines, which are all new areas in the game. And to get to those mines, we're gonna fly across this map. Movement is back, baby. Well, sort of. This doesn't quite feel as good as Luffy's Gomu Gomu Rocket. It's close, but it bumps into some obstacles that you normally wouldn't. Also, as a concept, this one is kinda weird. I mean, you simply fly as a fireball, but you still need a grapple point to launch off of. That's a bit strange. Still, way better movement than Zoro, so it is a nice upgrade. Underground mine number 1 is barely worth talking about, honestly. You run into a pacifista and some pirates, but can't really get much information out of it, so even the story doesn't move forward here. It is a pretty small mine, but it is a brand new space, so there's that. The second mine, however, is enormous. This is my favorite of the whole DLC, because this is all set up to be a gigantic stealth mission. There are many enemies, and they patrol around each area, but if you're careful with where you land and who you take down first, you can clear most of this mine without alerting anyone. Something that I failed to do on the third encounter immediately, but let's not dwell on that. It's got a mini boss halfway through, guarding a treasure chest with some equipment, and it was also a nice reminder that World Seeker doesn't do checkpoints, because I died really close to the end of this mine, and the game threw me right back to the start. Having learned my lesson, I made my progress carefully, made it all the way to the top, where we have the first real boss fight of the DLC. Germa. Now, the brothers' moveset is pretty similar to the one that Luffy has to deal with in the main game, so it didn't really feel like a new boss fight, even if Sabo has a new moveset. Honestly, this fight felt a bit filler. They barely interacted with each other. What moves the plot forward is Sabo finding this report on this desk, saying that the warden has already mined the Dynastones, but he hasn't informed the government. Now, why would a government warden not inform their superiors? Intrigued by this, he decides to track down the warden Isaac. CP0 seems to be chasing him down too. It's gonna be hard talking to Isaac with all of these agents around, so Sabo does what he does best, which is to stealth take down every single one of them. After doing so, he finally gets some one-on-one time with Isaac. Turns out, Isaac was the anonymous tip that brought Sabo to this island. He planned for Sabo to deal with Germa and with Cypherpole. And when he asks him what he has done with the Dynastones, all Isaac says is, hey, there are some more agents down at the Crystal Canyon. You can find out what they know, I guess. Okay, at this point, Sabo is just being played on purpose, bro. Sabo does find out that the Dynastones are in the Sky Prison, which you already knew if you play the base game, but that's when something interesting happens. Eh?
なんだここは。ミロワールドにようこそ。革命軍参謀総長。小生片栗。
I was shocked. Katakuri is not a part of the base game at all. They actually added another major One Piece character specifically for this DLC, and he's actually a really cool boss fight too. He serves absolutely no purpose for the plot, much like Germa. He shows up, you guys fight, and then Sabo leaves about as quickly as he came in. But it's still cool fan service and a unique boss fight. And this is as far as I'll describe the plot, just in case you guys want to play it for yourselves and you don't have the whole thing spoiled. I will say though that despite the promising setup, I was pretty let down by the whole story of Sabo here. He ended up uncovering exactly what we already knew from the main game, just through a different method. I also feel like the tie-in with the main story was done worse than Zoro. For instance, when Sabo and John meet for the first time, they talk as if they already knew each other. And maybe he knows about her because he's got intel or whatever, but it felt like I missed some cutscene here where he learned about John and what she's done for Luffy. Also, Luffy and Sabo do meet in the main game. There's this big reunion cutscene. They didn't work that into this DLC at all. Luffy also has a pretty big side mission with Sabo where he investigates different government locations. They could have easily done Sabo's side of that mission in this DLC, but instead they completely ignored it too. So the story integration felt a lot worse this time around. Also, between chapters, it felt like the game really wanted me to grind for equipment because each chapter just felt like I was super underleveled. Like, extreme difficulty is meant to feel hard, but this just felt impossible. Luckily, every DLC also came with challenge missions. I guess I forgot to mention this on Zoro, but challenge missions are these repeatable challenges, and the better you do, the more materials you get. So some materials have become pretty easy to farm because you know exactly where to get them. But the problem is, each DLC has its own challenge missions, so you never have access to all the materials you need. Some of them you still need to farm the old-fashioned way. Anyway, I was able to upgrade my equipment and eventually finish this DLC. And normally, I don't have a problem with RPGs asking me to level up before a mission, but this DLC also took me around 4.5 hours to beat, same as Zoro, so the grind in the middle felt intentional to pad out the playtime, rather than them wanting us to explore the game's RPG systems. I will say though, even underleveled, takedowns still one shot when you are playing as Sabo, so they definitely wanted you to play the stealth role here. Problem is, the game's stealth was designed with Luffy in mind, meaning that stealth is not very effective and enemies are sometimes hyper aware of where you are. And some encounters are just straight up forced to be open combat. Stealth is simply impossible in a situation like this. It does have some peak cutscenes, I'll give it that, so if you're a Sabo fan, you're gonna get your Sabo fan service. Personally though, this DLC felt weaker than Zoro's, even though it showed a lot more promise initially. But yes, I also got all the trophies because I hate myself. Honestly, it's not looking good, but I've also heard many people say that the last DLC was actually the best one. If you remember Law's role in the main story, he was all about exploring the Sky Islands above in search of a rumored treasure. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this DLC. That kid you just met is Rule, and he wants to be the world's greatest adventurer. And the first step to doing that is to finish mapping the Sky Islands, something his father started but never managed to finish. Gameplay-wise, Law also has a simple combo, but you may notice that he has a new meter above his head. That's the room meter, which is used for some of his moves. For instance, his projectiles, a scanning ability that allows him to see through walls, and some combo options that you unlock later on. But Law's best new move is Shambles. You simply point at where you want to go and you teleport there. This is absolutely game-changing. Shambles makes exploration a lot of fun. It makes stealth incredible because you can just pick where you want to teleport to hide or to take down enemies. And even in combat, you can use it to close the distance or to dodge attacks. Shambles not only makes this game a lot better, it makes Law feel like the most unique character so far in terms of gameplay. Now, in case you remember the base game, the Sky Islands were pretty small and limited, but in this DLC you have a brand new, bigger Sky Island to explore. And as you explore the island, you keep running into Rule, and according to him, this island is shaped like a donut. There's a hole in the middle, and that doesn't make sense. That's not how Sky Islands usually work. So Rule is off investigating on his own, but you keep running into him, usually in a situation that looks like this. Rule is such an incredible side character. He goes through an incredible arc in this DLC while keeping things so humorous and light. I'm not gonna spoil it, but I think he's the best original One Piece character I have ever seen in a One Piece game. You could say that Rule actually rules. Now, interrogating this guy, we find out that the treasure is in the Sky Prison, the one built by Isaac, where the main game begins and ends. And in this DLC, we find out that the Sky Prison was actually ripped from the middle of this island. That's why it is shaped like a donut. And since Rule knows so much about it from drawing his map, with his help, we can jump off a specific location to get there, or fall off a specific location, I guess. Turns out the treasure was, you guessed it, the Dynastones. This prison is a giant bomb ready to blow up this island, but I guess this is where I will stop following Law's story and leave the rest for you to discover in case you're thinking of playing this DLC. This story also wasn't super well integrated with the main game. I mean, it started well, but it's hella retconned. For instance, this didn't happen and we played as Luffy. We would have seen this in the main game. So yeah, they did create some new scenes and events to tell a more satisfying story, but this time I'm actually okay with it. Because if you're gonna retcon, at least do it for a good reason. Gameplay-wise, I love Law. There is one super that feels a bit overpowered. They probably tuned that one a bit too high, and that might be the reason why I didn't feel like I needed grinding this time around. But other than that, he has such an incredible, unique set of skills, which I fully unlocked, of course. And this unique gameplay paired with this incredible story really made me want more One Piece games or more One Piece DLC without the Straw Hats being the main characters. This is such a big universe. There is a lot of potential for cool stories like this one. That's how good of a DLC this was. It inspired me to want more of it. It also felt slightly longer than the other two. I beat it in around 5 hours, and it was by far the most enjoyable out of the 3 packs. Which begs the question, was I wrong to skip this DLC? Well, if I wasn't a fan of 2 out of the 3 packs, you would probably say, yeah, this is not worth the money. But I would still say that I was wrong. I should have given all of them a shot. Not only because without it, I would miss out on the Law DLC, which I thought was fantastic, but I would also miss out on everything they added to the base game. All of those challenge missions they put on each DLC, you can do all of them as Luffy. You have new equipment that you can grind for Luffy with these new challenge missions to make him stronger so you can beat the boss rush game mode that they also added for free. I missed all of this because I didn't come back to check the DLC. But the main reason why I should have given it a shot is, if you go to YouTube right now and look for a review for the World Seeker Zoro DLC, for instance, it's really hard to find one. You'll see a lot of playthroughs, but you're missing that critique. You're missing that opinion of whether the creator thinks it was worth it or not. And that's what my channel is all about. My mission has always been to make anime games better, and I do that by developing communities with things like tournaments and other events, but also with reviews, with honest feedback that goes back to these developers and publishers, and at the same time lets you know which products I think are worth your money. And my voice doesn't have to be the only one, but we are so very few in this space that I think every opinion counts. And that's why I'd love to know what you think of these 3 DLC packs if you have played them in the comments down below. Do you think they're worth it? Which one was your favorite? Let me know all of that down there. And for more One Piece, check out the latest Pirate Warriors DLC. Thanks for watching. Bye.